let me tell you about an experience I had once out in Elk Island Park.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I think, fairly early in the morning in the spring. And so I was out there all by myself taking pictures. And I found myself tiptoeing. And I said to me, why am I tiptoeing here? And it came to me that I was in somebody else's house there. This was where life for a lot of plants and animals, this was their home, and I was a visitor.
Mm-hmm.
And I really felt the impact of the natural environment, the importance of it being intact and functioning.
Absolutely.
So I actually had tears in my eyes at that point.
Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome to Your Forest. I'm Matthew Christoph. Today, I've got a long podcast for you guys, but it was really awesome. It was a good one. David Wasserman. David Wasserman is a representative of the Alberta Hiking Association. So it's a different perspective, coming from a non-science background, from just a wilderness and nature appreciation background. And he's an awesome guy. He's been hiking for decades now. He's hiked a lot of the trails in Alberta as well as North America just in general. He's got a wealth of knowledge, a lot of experience trying to organize groups to speak for hiking and non-motorized recreation. So yeah, the Alberta Hiking Association, really cool organization. Their role is to advocate for the interests of hikers, walkers, snowshoers, that kind of stuff. And he came on to talk about his experience, how he grew up. Yeah, it was really, really good. We got his perspective on forest management kind of near the end there. And we talked about all kinds of different stuff, from just appreciating forest values and what it means for making you a better person and making you happier and more relaxed and just allowing you to create new perspectives and new values that, perpetuate into the future. It was really cool. Like I said, more on forest management near the end there. Some of the stuff they're advocating for as a group. It was really good. I think you guys are going to like it. He got really into photography. He's been taking photos of a lot of the hikes he's been on. And that's how he kind of started to get into plant identification and species identification and starting to learn some of the stuff behind, appreciating the actual biodiversity out there. So, yeah, really cool. I hope you guys like it. I won't talk anymore. Just give you the three sponsors. So the Forest Resource Improvement Association, thank you very much. Greenlink Forestry, thank you very much. And Damage Timber, damagetimber.com. Go there. You can buy some clothes. You can support environmental sciences through the sale of the clothing. Your Forest 10 at checkout, and you will save 10%. So yeah, check them out. Without any further ado, let's do this. David Wasserman and myself, we talk about nature appreciation, hiking, and a bunch of other stuff. Here we go. So yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for taking the time to come out here. It's going to be interesting to have somebody from a different perspective other than forest management professionals and that kind of stuff, right? So let's just start off. What's your background? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get into hiking? Just that basic stuff right from the beginning.
Well, I was born and until I was 15, lived in a small town in Manitoba on the edge of a forest reserve.
Okay.
And in those days, people didn't worry so much about their kids wandering around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I often would go off walking in the nearby bush with my friends, and there was actually a forestry tower right in town.
Oh, nice.
And of course, I went to school with the kids who lived in the base of the tower.
Oh, yeah.
And so we would go climbing up that tower every so often and look around.
That was before the safety regulations, I imagine.
That was before people worried too much, and we all survived. I sometimes wonder how. But my mother, excuse me, my mother was a Dutch war bride, and between the wars, she was. They have in Europe and now in North America as well something called Volkssport.
Okay.
Which is basically walking clubs where they get together as groups and go on walks, mostly in urban areas. It's not so much a hiking thing.
Yeah. Volkssport?
Yeah, Volksport. I think it's a German word, but
right.
It's used. There is a Alberta Volkssport Society.
Oh, cool.
Which I don't know if they still are, but has been a member group of the Alberta Hiking Association.
Okay.
Anyway, my mother was keen on this sort of stuff and did a lot of walking before the war and before she met my father and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I still have a little box full of the walking medals that they would give. You know, if you participate, you get a little medal that you could keep as a souvenir.
Right, for certain distances and other things, right? Yeah,
right.
Cool.
So anyways, that was one of the inspirations. My mother would take us out for walks, and my father had a general store, so he had to be there almost all the time. But when we were kids, my mother would take me and my two sisters in the family station wagon and drive all over North America. When I was 9 years old, I still have a picture of me riding up the Mount Norquay chairlift.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because that was one of the things they did then. They'd take your picture and sell it to you.
Oh, yeah. They still do that, I think, at Disneyland and stuff.
And we also walked up Sulphur Mountain before there was a Sulphur Mountain gondola.
Oh, okay.
So that was, as I said, when I was 9 years old. And,
yeah.
I remember another time we all went hiking in Grand Teton National Park. And so that... I started young and just never stopped.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that was a common occurrence then in your household for the family to go out like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So you created a love for it and a passion for it early then.
Yes. Yeah. It was just seemed to be a natural thing to do.
Yeah.
And, very satisfying. And then I took up photography. As a matter of fact, I think I started taking pictures when I was about 10.
Oh, yeah.
Got more serious when I was able to afford a better camera, which was a good 15 years later than that.
And now a good camera is just dime a dozen, right? They're everywhere.
Yeah, it's a little more challenging to take up photography when you have to mail in your roll of film and wait 2 weeks to see what you got. But,
yeah.
And now instant feedback, everybody can be a photographer.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's one of the things about hiking. Photographers are often hikers because they have to get to where they're going. And, birders are hikers because they want to see what species are around. Fishermen are hikers to get to the streams they want to. So, just about everybody's a hiker.
Yeah, hunters as well. Just they
hunters.
Got a different. Yeah.
So that's why hiking is kind of under the radar, because it's not something that requires a lot of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
You can turn into a hiker. You just happen to park and decide you want to walk at the top of the hill. Suddenly you're a hiker.
Yeah.
So because the very informal nature of the activity, it's something that kind of doesn't get a lot of attention.
Right.
And that's to turn to the Alberta Hiking Association. That's one of the main reasons it was formed, is that all the other outdoor activities tend to have province-wide organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's any consultations going on, either by the government or by other organizations, then they don't know who to talk to about hiking.
Right. It falls off the radar.
So, according to the various surveys the government has done, about 50% of the population goes walking for recreation or exercise on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah.
So that means there's about 1.5 million hikers in this province.
Yep. No, it's pretty awesome.
And they're not organized in any fashion except possibly by being members of the Alberta Hiking Association or members of hiking clubs that are part of the Alberta Hiking Association.
Right. So is the Alberta Hiking Association, would you say that's the big one?
It's the umbrella organization. It's the only one speaking for hikers as our bylaws say. The main objective is to act as an advocate for provincial and regional levels for walking, hiking, and snowshoeing interests. That's our number one objective, because no one else can do that.
Right. No, someone needs to be there to represent everybody, right? That everyone else has got an organization. Why not the hikers? That makes perfect sense. Yeah, like I guess one of the main reasons I wanted to bring you on was to talk about what hiking has done for you as a person and what you think it can provide for society. Because, like, I mean, me personally, I found a love of nature through my parents, who were both foresters as well. And I grew up on an acreage backed up onto the boreal forest, right? So I spent all my free time there, and I couldn't imagine growing up without that, right? You built it going on hikes with your family, and it seems like you built an everlasting love for the environment and for nature. So yeah, I wanted to get your perspective on like maybe how hiking made you like a better person, or what kind of appreciation it brought to you, or perspective it brought for you that you think you might not have gotten if you hadn't done that.
Well, it's just let me tell you about an experience I had once out in Elk Island Park. Mm-hmm. It was I think fairly early in the morning in the spring, and so I was out there all by myself taking pictures, and I found myself tiptoeing. And I said to me, why am I tiptoeing here? And it came to me that I was in somebody else's house there. This was where life for a lot of plants and animals, this was their home, and I was a visitor. Mm-hmm. And I really felt the impact of the natural environment, the importance of it being intact and functioning.
Absolutely.
So I actually had tears in my eyes at that point.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's a powerful thing, right? Just being able to come to those kind of realizations in the middle of something, right? Like, yeah, we're people and we've been a part of the landscape, but also you're right. Like we go home to our houses that are built, and we, you know what I mean? We sleep in a bed and we have central heating, and then we go out into the wilderness and realize you're right. Exactly. We're in their kitchen, right? So it's a sobering fact to realize that they're out there all the time, and that, you know what I mean? We're having a relationship with them in one way or the other. But it's Elk Island National Park is actually a pretty amazing spot. I mean, they've done a good job of maintaining biodiversity, and they have the plains bison, the wood bison. They've got elk, they've got deer, I believe they have wolves and other things that get in. I don't know about
the wolves. They do have moose. You didn't mention the moose.
That's moose. Yeah. And then all the birds and everything, right? And it's a beautiful sanctuary, just like not far from the city here. Yeah.
It's an amazing place.
Yeah.
But it is the only completely fenced national park.
Right.
And I guess that has to be.
Yeah, and there's controversy around that too, but we don't have to get into that. No. That's not what we're here for. But yeah, no, that's a beautiful story. Actually, I that's the kind of stuff that I think people like to hear and they associate with. You know what I mean? They really come to terms and go, yeah, you're right. And I think a lot of people, I mean, you're not going to meet somebody who doesn't love a good mountain view or whatever, right? If it's beautiful, it's beautiful. People love it, right? They may not like the grittiness of going for a hike when it starts to rain or it's windy or whatever. They may not enjoy that, but the payoff at the end, when you get that view, or you run into that wildlife or some amazing tree or a waterfall or whatever it is, right? It definitely gives you an appreciation for the outdoors and wanted to see more and more of it, right? Yeah, I love it.
Anyway, there's a lot of people who appreciate this. And one of the things that you get to see are the cycles of nature. There's a trail off the Moline Lake Road, the Watchtower Trail, that was burnt over just 2, 3, 4 years ago. I forget how long.
Okay.
And the next, about a year later, my hiking club, 4 of us, went on a hike through the burned over area, and you could see the regeneration going on. And that's very enlightening as well, because fire is a natural part of the process, and you get to see how it works and what it makes happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you never go hiking, you don't get to see these things.
Yep. It's easy to miss, for sure. I think a lot of people, especially now with BC blowing up last year and this year and all kinds of, and people dying in the States and all kinds of, the wildfire is a big topic, right? And it's really hard for people to, I find people that are uninitiated, they don't know, to understand that that's supposed to be there, right? It needs to be there. And unfortunately, it can cause problems for us, but it's inevitable, right? So,
yeah, and it took quite a while for the parks people, for example, to realize that fire suppression, constant fire suppression, was really interfering with the natural cycle. And then they started doing controlled burns, which sometimes became uncontrolled, but
yeah, it happens.
It has to be allowed to happen. You can't. You're probably familiar with the is it the Bridgeland photographs?
The Mountain Legacy Project?
Yeah.
I just had Rick Arthur on 2 podcasts ago. We did a episode at the top of Mount Solomon, actually. And it was incredible. Rick really knows his stuff. Yeah.
So you could compare from those photographs from about 100 years ago, the amount of ground cover, the amount of trees, and you could see that they're losing a lot of a certain type of habitat by all that fire suppression. But people don't like having their houses burned.
Well, that's just it, right? We live, we have an integrated landscape, right? We're in it, so you have to protect people's homes and infrastructure, but at the same time, yeah, it's a super complicated issue that I always bring up, and you're right. Like we have been suppressing for a long time, and it's created a situation where you have more old growth and more volatile fuel, arguably, than would naturally have existed without our intervening. But we also needed to intervene because we were there, and we don't want people to die, so that's important. So yeah, it's a really interesting balance try to be struck there, right? I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And that's one reason why people should go hiking, so they get a deeper understanding of the balance of nature, the natural processes, and our place in nature and what we're doing to it.
Yep. No, absolutely. There's something to be said for that. Getting out there and getting firsthand experience and appreciation for it can only help bring those values to people, right? No, and I think that's kind of what the point of this was, to try and get people excited about environmental management and engaged, so that the right decisions can be made for the right reasons, not just emotional, rash decisions that aren't based in anything, right? So, no, it's interesting to hear that your perspective. I mean, your perspective is not far off from my own as far as the conclusions that you've come to, right? But I imagine it's taken a long time to collect. I mean, I was lucky enough to have people point at me and go, "This is why," right? I'm like, "Oh, okay, great." But yeah, it is one thing definitely to be out hiking and see this blackened forest and look down and see this dense growth coming back up, right? Like it pops back up like nothing. It's really incredible. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's part of the natural cycle. And as far as biodiversity and that kind of thing, right? It creates its own habitat, right? Lots of birds lots of insects depend on that exact habitat. Even moose, actually. Rick Arthur was telling me a story on the other podcast. He was mentioning about the First Nations people used to burn willow. I think it was willow or alder. I can't remember. They used to burn willow or alder patches, and they said within 2 hours there'd be moose in those patches. And there was something about the burning of the bark. So the bark had some kind of nutrient that they needed, and I'm totally forgetting. He explained it all way better than I am doing in the last episode or whatever. But there was a nutrient in there that was not bioavailable, and the moose were somehow aware of this through evolution or whatever. But as soon as it burnt, now it's bioavailable for them to digest. And I guess within 2 hours they'd be in there chewing on the burnt shrubs. It's pretty fascinating, like the role that fire plays that we don't see. Right? It's easy to think about it as a destructive force, but yeah, it's also a bringer of life. Yeah.
That brings to mind the experience they had with the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone Park.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Where they discovered that that it had knock-on effects that they hadn't really realized when, because there were wolves that the streams, the open areas around streams where the moose would graze everything right down to the bottom, and the deer, they couldn't hang around there so much because they were too visible to the wolves. Yeah. Which meant that the plant growth around the streams grew up more, which meant the fish were able to, that needed shaded streams rather than wide open ones. And of course, the fish are food for the birds and eagles and so on and so forth. And just putting that one missing element back into the environment made all the difference.
Yeah. No, it brings back balance, right? I mean, I think a lot of people they would have looked at Yellowstone and they would have gone, look at all these elk, all these beautiful elk. This is incredible. And you're like, there's not supposed to be 100,000 elk in this area, right? Like that's not natural. Although it looks really cool, it's not a balanced ecosystem, and you're heading towards a collapse if you maintain that, right? So bringing in the wolves, as controversial as it might have been at the time, I think even popular culture has come to recognize that was a good thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. And it might upset people because they go to Yellowstone and probably have trouble seeing ungulates now, but I mean, more so than before. I've never been. I don't know. Have you been?
A couple of times, yeah.
Yeah. Done some hiking in there?
No, I was quite young at the time. The first time, and the second time I was with my wife and children, and we'd go on short hikes around the nearest geyser, go see Old Faithful and so on.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the time to go too far.
Right. It's a beautiful spot, though, I imagine.
It is, yes.
Yeah. No, very.
And much different than anything we've got here in Canada with all that thermal activity.
Mm-hmm. It's a different ecoregion for sure. Totally different thing going on down there. More, I believe it's a little bit more drier, a little bit more deserty, I guess. I don't know. Is it? No?
No. It's all fairly high altitude, though.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, okay.
And there's all this thermal activity, all the water bubbling up hot out of the ground really makes a different kind of environment.
Oh, yeah. You have a super volcano underneath your feet. I can't imagine what that must do.
Yeah, well, you can worry about that if you want. But
I'm not worried about it. What's the point, right? If that thing goes off, we're all done anyways.
Yeah. Anyway, this one thing that hiking does is get you out into these environments. And if you're in a park of some kind, national, provincial, state, whatever, there's usually some kind of interpretive signage, although that's underfunded.
Yeah, no, I imagine it probably is.
You stop, and one thing about hiking is you like to stop. Oh, this uphill stuff. Let me find an excuse to stop.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a sign I can read.
Yeah. Are you tired? No, just reading the sign.
Just reading the sign.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm definitely guilty of that. Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like the hiking is really it's a good, like you said, it's an easy step to take. Mm-hmm. Pun intended.
One step, another step.
Yeah, just keep stepping. You'll get there. Yeah, that's awesome. So do you think? How do you think hiking and getting out into the nature and appreciation for nature has improved your life or improved the lives of your family? Or
well, it certainly maintained my my health pretty well.
Yeah. That's a big plus.
You know,
Living longer is always good.
And you know, there's talk now of something they call nature deficit disorder.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that too many people, especially younger people, are not exposed to nature. The Japanese apparently have a concept they call, it translates as forest bathing. You go out into a natural environment and you're just there to absorb nature, and this improves your mental health and your status. It makes you a more relaxed and a peaceful person.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that seems to be the way it works for me.
Absolutely. No, me as well. I mean, some of the time that I covet most in my year is we go away for a week in the middle of September for elk hunting, and I'm alone all day. Right, I'm with some family in the evening, but all day long I'm by myself, and you're just very quiet. You're not talking all day long. You're just taking things in and reading sign and understanding and watching the birds and everything, right? And just spending time alone, listening, taking in. You always see amazing things, right? Like you see owls and you see bears and wolves and ungulates and species you didn't even know existed, right? Like just different interactions, and you can't run into those types of things and make those connections unless you're out there. And I totally agree. I've heard of the bathing, and then they also do something like grounding, I think they call it. They take off their shoes when they're in the bush, and they just stand on the bare earth, right? Try and connect themselves to the earth somehow. And then there's another one like tree hugging or something like that. I think they also did, and just trying to connect to nature. And it gets kind of a little, like, it gets out there, right? But it's interesting to just be. I think, yeah, I agree. It's some of the most calming, relaxing, and sobering things you can do, right? I mean, it's very, I don't know if meditatory is a word, but it's like meditation, right? Just taking it in, not worrying about your worries, and enjoying the sights and sounds, right? It's perfect. But
one of the things that keeps people from going hiking is a fear of nature, especially bears. For some reason, people are afraid of bears.
Yeah.
Well, what they don't realize is that bears are usually afraid of people. I'm not talking polar bears; they're not. But
yeah,
the grizzlies and the blacks will usually do their best to avoid people.
Yeah.
And if you make sure the bear knows you're there, they will do their best to make sure you don't know they're there.
Yeah.
I've seen this, and I've also seen some very disturbing sights near the road. I remember once returning from a hike in Yoho Park with a friend, and we came across a bear jam, which, for those who don't know what that is, that's a traffic jam caused by people spotting bears. And there's
that's a good word for it. I like it. You got lots of elk jams in Jasper and Banff too.
bunch of cars were parked right next to the road to Takakaw Falls, and people were out of there, and they were chasing after this mother black bear and her two cubs, which is just terrible and disgusting as far as I'm concerned. It's a lot of
stupid's another good word.
Well, yeah, that's another good word too. A lot of people, of course, are urban people who have no idea that that nature has different rules.
They want the Instagram following, right? They're just trying to get the picture so they can get famous or whatever.
But the parks people do their best. Anybody who drives into the parks is going to get a little brochure telling them not to do that. But I guess some people just don't read or don't care or get too excited.
Well, and the biggest problem is that they do it. They often do it right in the middle of the road, right in the middle of the highway. I mean, people are going 90 kilometers an hour down the highway, and all of a sudden there's 70 vehicles parked on the shoulder in the way, and there's people walking in, there's kids and stuff, and it's just a disaster waiting to happen, right? Oh, and by the way, there's a 7-point or like whatever, 7-point bull elk in the middle of rutting season standing there feeding. You're like, oh yeah, this is going to go well. Because they're not known
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong? It's not like they're known for ramming into things when they're pissed off and feel threatened. By the way, they've got swords on their heads. Don't worry about those.
There was another time in Lake Louise that I was leading a hiking trip, and we got there early on the Friday, so we thought we'd drive up to the lake. And just outside of the lower Lake Louise village, cars were just all lined up on both sides of the road, and there was a grizzly at the top of this, not exactly a cliff. I think it had actually was a cut that they had to make the roads. It was, very sparsely.
Yeah.
Anyway, the grizzly was going up and along the top, and everybody was getting out of their cars, and there was a lady there walking her dog down at the bottom. And I rolled down my window and said, that would make a nice light snack for that grizzly. But that poor bear wasn't getting the space it needed. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting problem, right? Because I agree with you. It's having people invade their space like that. It not only is bad for them, but it's dangerous to the people, right? Like it's a problem, and it's a weird one as well, because you want people to appreciate nature and to have experiences with bears and whatever, right? So they can have those stories and they can build that value, right? But at the same time, you also want them to have, as minimum of an impact on that as you can, as possible, right? Especially when you can put people's safety at risk.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation, but yeah, I wonder, do you know if they can give out tickets for that? I don't think so, hey? Like in the parks?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. I feel like there's probably something they can do. I don't imagine they give it out very often, because every time you go through the parks, you run into that. It's a really common occurrence. I'm sure it is the same in the States too.
I do know they can give out tickets if you let your dog go chasing after the wildlife.
Right. Yeah.
There was a recent story on that.
Oh, okay. But that's not. I mean, that's people. It sounds like you saw a dude chasing after a bear. That's equally as troublesome, right? Like, man, it's an issue. Crazy. Yeah, and I think that it's really important for people to get out there and really just get those values in, right? Because I think you're right with that. You were talking about the nature deficit disorder. That's what it was called.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it seems like that would make sense to me. There's just less people concerned about, quote unquote, the natural world, right? So I think any group or any person that's out there trying to convince people to get out there, I think you're only going to make your life better by appreciating something as wholesome as the forest, right?
And so having hiking clubs where people can be gently introduced to the ethics of hiking, and as well as all the techniques, is important. Another hike I was on in the Skokie Valley at the Baker Lake campground, there were three of us who are experienced hikers, and one guy was on his first hike. And we were sitting at one of the tables in the campground having our evening meal, and someone came up and said, there's a grizzly bear down in the valley down below. So this inexperienced guy gets up, and we said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to see the bear. And he said, no, you're not. We said that kind of in unison.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you don't know, you don't know, right?
Yeah.
You think that was something I talked about a little while ago, is that like the anthropomorphizing, whatever, attributing human traits to animals, right? Like that's another problem that you see, right? Where people I don't think they need to be afraid of bears if they're respectful of bears. But if you're disrespectful of them and you're up in their grill when they're trying to feed or protect their young or whatever, then yeah, you should probably be terrified of them, because they could tear you to pieces. But yeah, like you said, they're not looking for a fight, right? Well, most of the time they're just curious what you are, and then they're taken off. I've never had a negative. I mean, I've had worrisome situations with black bears, but never anything where I was only worrisome because of the proximity and it didn't realize I was there yet, right? Not so much But most of the situations I have with bears myself is something you hear it coming off and it kind of does a circle around you. And a lot of people mistake that for, oh, it's stalking me if you hear it going around you, right? It's like, no, it's trying to catch your wind. It's trying to figure out what you are, right? And a lot of people might freak out at that. But almost all of the situations I've had in the bush with bears have been something like that, where they just, you hear something and you hear it kind of go around you, and then all of a sudden you might see it through the trees, and then it sees you, and then it's gone. It's just trying to figure out what you are. They're just curious, kind of like we are, right? But yeah, it's easy for people to, either go one way or the other with it. Be absolutely terrified or be not nearly terrified enough. Again, another balance to be struck there. Eh? Yeah. So what's so I guess we should get into the AHA a little bit more. So what are some of the major things you guys stand for? I know you're representing hikers in the province. But yeah, what are the major things that you guys are striving to achieve?
I will read you the official objectives from our bylaws.
Okay, don't make it too long.
There are only 5 of them.
Okay.
I already read the first one: to act as an advocate at provincial and regional levels for walking, hiking, and snowshoeing interests. Second, to create an information network that facilitates sharing ideas, concerns, and actions needed to promote and preserve hiking and the natural environment on which it relies. To advance the development and maintenance of well-built hiking trails and to encourage trail building initiatives in Alberta. To promote responsible, minimal impact hiking that respects the natural environment and to educate through example. And to increase awareness about the benefits to health and local economies of walking, hiking, and snowshoeing.
Awesome.
So that's what the AHA is all about.
Right.
And I didn't write any of those, by the way. Those.
So what are some of the issues that you guys have set yourselves against that, in the province, or more recent ones maybe, or whatever strikes your memory?
Well, we're very invested in getting a wildland park in the Bighorn area. Right. That's probably the most recent initiative. Right. We're taking another role back in the development of the castle area. We were involved in that. And we're also we're also interested in getting the national parks to make more use of volunteer labor. You may or may not know this, but the number of maintained trails in Jasper Park has declined from about 110, or was it 1,100? Yeah, 1,100 kilometers of maintained trails about 40 years ago. It's down to about 350.
Really?
Yeah.
So
they keep saying, well, we're going to stop maintaining this trail.
So when you say maintain, do you mean just removing deadfall and keeping it open for hikers? You're not necessarily like packing it or anything like that.
No, but replacing the bridges when they get washed out.
Right.
That's an important one.
Any steps that might exist or something like that. Yeah.
And just clearing deadfall mostly and maintaining bridges.
That's weird that they would do that. They just low on funding kind of thing.
That's basically it.
Allocated it somewhere else. That's unfortunate because the problem with that is then you have people just walking off into the bush at random, which creates lost people, which is not good, and it creates you're spreading out the impact of people rather than focusing it in specific areas, right? So you're going to have more. I would imagine you'll have more erosion. You'll have more negative impact on the flora and fauna in the area if people start to fan out rather than stay concentrated, right?
But their surveys have shown that 95% of park visitors never get more than about 5 kilometers from the highway.
I'd say that's definitely true. I would definitely agree with that.
So those backcountry trails that my hiking club compatriots enjoy the most are not very heavily used. And, the recent federal governments have sort of felt that it's important that the parks be self-sustaining. So they have to set their priorities where the people who are paying for it, the park users, are, and they're not getting very far into the backcountry, most of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Like if they were to allow organizations like yourself, people that are out hiking, to clean out any deadfall that might be there, people can have a little pocket saw or whatever. But I mean, if you get a big Doug fir down or something like that, I don't imagine you're going to take a little pocket saw out and have at her. But you'd think you would be able to. They'd set up a system where you could report, like, oh, there's a tree down here that needs cutting or something. You know what I mean? Something along those lines. Because, yeah, that's removing access that would otherwise be beneficial towards creating more values, beneficial to nature and to the means by which the park is supposed to be.
But parks are very leery of allowing anyone except their paid employees to do this kind of thing. There may be liability concerns, but there's a bit of a contrast between Jasper Park, where there's something called the Jasper Trail Alliance, which is kind of a subcommittee of the Friends of Jasper, which works very well with the park administration in Jasper and does trail maintenance. On a volunteer basis, and they're led by trained trail builders and so on. But in Banff Park, I don't know if you're familiar with the Howes Pass Trail.
No,
I've never been there myself either. But it's a historic trail that isn't maintained and is I think I read a figure somewhere. There's 400 plus deadfall blocking the way.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And the
historic in which way? Is there landmarks along the way, or is there?
It used to be a trade route.
Oh yeah.
Back in the 1800s.
Gotcha. For furs and that kind of thing, probably. Yeah.
I think it might have been the route to Kootenay Plains.
Okay.
Which the Kootenai Indians would come in from BC and trade with the Plains Indians.
Okay.
But anyway, the Alberta, the question, anyway, the horse people, whatever I keep forgetting the name of their organization, even though they're on the Alberta TrailNet board with me. They volunteered to go through there because it's an excellent way to go horse touring.
Oh yeah, they can carry a chainsaw, no problem.
And to clear that out, and they were totally refused permission.
Really?
And there was another story I read a couple of years ago. There was someone in Yoho Park who took matters into his own hands and started clearing trails and was fined for the process.
It's a really weird one, right? Because
yeah.
you don't want people going crazy and just cutting down whenever they want, because they could argue that, like, well, that one was gonna fall, so I cut it down and whatever, right? People get carried away, but I think there could be a reasonable amount of competence assumed towards certain groups, right? And then who's doing that, and you can hold them accountable if they do start to get out of hand, right? But yeah, that's an unfortunate case.
Yeah, if it's an organized group of not a bunch of wild men with with chainsaws that offers to work in cooperation, then you'd think that they would leap at the chance, but they don't.
Yeah,
they don't.
That's a tough one. So you guys are pushing towards trying to create some kind of resolve there. As far as
to work with parks on that.
Well, I hope that works out. Yeah, because that could be frustrating, I imagine, for a group that's the sole purpose of having more trails. Oh, that makes sense.
There's another issue that I'm not sure to what extent the Hiking Association has taken a stand on this, but I do know that pretty much all of the ones I'm in contact with take the same idea, and that is a concern about the lobbying by the Off-Highway Vehicle Association people, who, particularly down in the Castle area, where they were very well organized in getting their point across. And I get a little worried that there's a division there that doesn't need to exist between people who have off-highway vehicles and people who have boots and go hiking. There are lots of people who have off-highway vehicles and have boots and go hiking.
Yeah.
And so when the leadership of those organizations say things like, don't keep us out of our parks, I say, we're not keeping you out. We just want to keep your off-highway vehicles out. You can go there anytime you want. And that kind of gets lost in the discussion. It's like an us versus them thing. And then if you can't use your ATV, you can't go. That's not true.
It's a really tough one, right? Like because yeah, again, it's one of those things where I had somebody on. Who was I talking to about that? I brought someone on. We were talking about the ATVs in like the Bighorn and that kind of stuff, right? And I understand people wanting to keep them out for specific reasons because they're kind of they're kind of unfettered right now. They're just kind of going everywhere, right? And that can cause serious problems. And there's certain areas that are very sensitive that you want to keep traffic that's going to cause erosion and other types of things to a minimum, right? Personally, I think I don't know. I'm not an expert on the issue at all. I know that there's anytime that somebody wants to remove access for a certain group of people who are creating values, nature values through that recreational process, I get worried just because I don't want people to never be able to go ATVing and that kind of stuff as long as they're doing it responsibly, right? I mean, there's people who can, if you're using the bridge instead of going through the creek, if you're using the trail instead of ripping up into the shale on the side of the mountain, if you're going along at like a moderate pace, not putting like hikers and equestrian users in danger, if you're a responsible user, I don't see why you shouldn't be allowed to be there, right? But it's the non-responsible users that cause the problems, right? And then people get emotional, right? Like you were saying, they stop looking at it as a hey, we have a common value here. We both want to use this landscape. We both like camping. We both like nature. We both like this, that, and the other thing. But we're coming at it from slightly different viewpoints. Why are we butting heads, right? When people could be working together to come to some kind of compromise and try and find a way forward that benefits everybody, right? And those compromises are hard to come by. And I think, yeah, it's a crazy situation because I get worried about cutting out those groups, but at the same time, because those groups, they're the ones who are responsible, right? The OHV groups, they're the ones that I know anyways, they're promoting bridge building and that kind of stuff. But again, all it takes is 10% of the OHV users or ATV users to be dicks about it and go cruising straight up the river where the bull trout are trying to spawn or whatever, right? And then you screwed everything up, right? So like, yeah, you don't want that. Nobody wants that. And the people who are doing that they don't know what they're doing. They don't realize the impact they're having. But
I think some of them don't care.
No, that too.
That's the sad part.
Yeah.
Ignorance you can deal with, but apathy.
Yeah, it's upsetting for sure.
But there's I have nothing against people having ATVs and using them responsibly. The problem is that motorized traffic and non-motorized traffic just don't work very well together on trails.
No, not the same trail. Absolutely. Yeah. It ruins it does ruin your experience as a hiker. You're trying to get away from the traffic. There's ATV. They should be separate trails, you would think. Yeah.
And there are lots of trails that ATV that are much more suited for ATVs than they are for hiking. And they can have their fun there, and hikers can have their fun where ATVs are more likely to do damage or drive away hikers.
There's compromises to be made there when we can work together. As long as people can cool their heads, right? And they go, let's work together. We're not enemies here. It's like people get so emotional about their standpoint, right? And they stick their feet in the ground and they kind of stop listening, right? They just kind of, nope, I'm right. And they stop listening. They don't take in new information and it just creates problems in the end, right? It's unfortunate. But it's really relieving to hear your point of view from the perspective of like, no, I'm pro use, just be responsible, right? I think that's the key point to take away from that for sure.
And I suppose we have to admit there are irresponsible hikers as well.
Of course, there's irresponsible people in every sense of the word, right?
There's one thing that many hikers do, especially members of hiking clubs, is they follow the leave no trace ethic. Mm-hmm. And if they are hiking and they see some garbage that somebody has left, some gum wrapper or whatever, they will pick it up and carry it out themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because that does kind of take away from the experience, right? Mm-hmm. When you see an oil can for something, why is it always oil cans? What's up with that? Like at the top of a mountain, there'll be like a drum of oil. Like, how? Why? How?
Although I was hiking in the upper Ram River once, which isn't really all that prime as hiking territory. It's more ATV and horse place use, and there were a lot of ATVs buzzing around, and I understood that was more their country than mine, but I was kind of happy to see that there really wasn't much garbage related to ATV use, no oil cans and so on and so forth. The messiest one was this horse camp.
Oh, yeah.
The horse people that I know would not make that kind of mess, but
no,
somebody had.
It's just, unique individuals. I was up in on Ghost River Road somewhere. I think it's called Ghost River Road. I don't know. We're down by Calgary, Cochrane area, right? Mm-hmm. And we pull up. This guy had been camping there he was there on a Tuesday before the long weekend, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of saving his camping spot. And we pulled up, and there, first of all, it's a dry, windy day, mm-hmm. right? His fire's smoldering. Mm-hmm. He's nowhere in sight. There's mm-hmm. beer cans and garbage and just crap everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And immediately, I'm just angry. This guy's nowhere in sight. I was just about to, I have a Wajax bag in the truck, and I was about to go and stir up the fire and put it out and then leave a note for this guy, right? Mm-hmm. Being like, no, I wasn't going to say anything mean because then he's not going to listen. I was going to say, hey, by the way, this, and this, don't leave your fire smoldering, clean up your garbage, mm-hmm. just be respectful. But he showed up right at that last minute, right? And so I sat there for about 10 minutes talking to him, just kind of getting to know where he was from, make him kind of feel comfortable, right? And I was like, oh, and by the way, don't do this. This is dangerous. Like next thing you know, your camping spot's not going to exist because of a fire mm-hmm. and all the garbage that like splayed the fire out around mm-hmm. everywhere, right? So, but yeah, there's just people that are just, whether they're ignorant of the consequences of their action or they fail to care. You're right. Mm-hmm. Those people always exist. I think that's always going to be the problem. We just have to try not to make rules around those rare individuals. Because at least in my opinion, I don't think they're the majority. They're a small minority, but they have the biggest impact, unfortunately.
Just last month, for the first time in my life, I took the Whistler's Skytram.
Oh, nice!
And went up there. It was a very cloudy day. At the beginning, you were basically in the cloud.
Cloudy or smoky?
It was cloudy then.
Cloudy.
This
okay.
is before the smoky part.
Yeah.
And there's signs at the upper tram station explaining how to behave here, mm-hmm. Stay on the trails and so on.
Yeah.
And one sign said, "Please don't make little piles of rocks, cairns, or as the Americans call them, ducks." Because this may confuse people, and it's disturbing the natural environment. So, as I was coming back down after wandering through the clouds for a while, I saw this family, this father, mother, and daughter, who were piling up rocks. And I said, "Did you know they specifically ask you not to do that?" Yeah. And they said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And they immediately disassembled what they were doing. So it's just a matter of not knowing. Often.
Most of it. I think so too. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming up on an hour here. I wanted to ask you one more kind of question. For yourself, like what is your perspective on kind of the state of forest management in the provinces as far as you see it, right? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of people don't know what's going on, and I don't expect you to know everything that's going on. You're not in that world. But I wanted to see what kind of things you've heard and see how different it is from what I'm aware of.
Well, one thing that most of the hikers that I know of do is hike almost exclusively in parks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in parks, any forest management that's being done is for different reasons than
It's not timber purposes.
it's not timber purposes.
Yeah.
So we don't get exposed very much, but in adjacent areas,
Mm-hmm.
There are concerns,
Mm-hmm.
and I had the experience of walking through a clearcut area.
Mm-hmm.
Just as an aside, that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that's taken me to various weird corners of the province is a hobby. You've heard of geocaching. Well, this is not geocaching, but it's fun for people with their handheld GPS.
Okay.
There's a website, confluence.org,
Okay.
which encourages people to go to where there's the crossing point of exact even numbered degrees of longitude and latitude.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And, with geocaching, someone's been there before because they had to put the cache there.
Right.
With Confluence visiting, as it's called, you never know.
Right.
You never know if it's accessible or not.
Right.
Anyway, this was down near Burnt Stick Lake, kind of southwest of Caroline.
Okay.
And this was a confluence. I can't remember which degrees of latitude and longitude it was, but
Okay.
you can look it up.
Yeah.
And the area had clearcuts that we had to walk across, and really, it's kind of disturbing. A clearcut, it totally destroys the environment. There are other ways of doing logging, a selective logging,
Mm-hmm.
that don't do quite as much harm and leave an environment that can regenerate itself much more easily. Even with all the tree planting that goes on in the clear cuts, a monoculture is not a real ecological environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I said, as a hiker, when I'm actually going on hiking trails, they're generally not places where there's
Right.
any forestry going on. So I probably have more exposure because of this other
The other thing that
hobby.
you're doing. Yeah. What's it called again? You called it
Confluence visiting.
Confluence. That's cool.
Confluence.org.
Yeah. Right.
If you want to look it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I'm curious about, because it's interesting for me to see, and that's a common opinion that people have regarding clear cuts and stuff, right? And it's an easy assumption to come to, because it makes it seems like you walk into this area and there was old growth or mature forest, and now there's kind of not, right? Especially if you're there fresh and all you're seeing is machine tracks over top of crunched up wood and debris and branches and stuff like that, right? And it can be disturbing if it's someone's local trail or something like you were doing, right? And it's a really hard one to try to explain to people, because it's like you're saying selective logging, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the science says now is that selective logging is actually less environmentally, what's the word? It's not that it's bad for the environment, but it's less so the idea behind forestry currently nowadays is that we're trying to emulate natural disturbance, right? So in most cases, in the boreal at least, that's fire, right? And what does fire do when it comes through an area, right? Like, it clears it all out, right? You start off with a fresh slate of ground, and then you have all new vegetation coming up. Generally, if it's a pine stand, you're going to have all pine coming up at probably 100,000 stems a hectare or something ridiculous like that, right? It comes up thick. And what we've realized is that the forest doesn't really regenerate at a place where one tree falls down and a new one comes up, and one tree falls down and a new one comes up. It regenerates, the boreal forest at least, most of the time in a wide swath, right? So a burn comes through, or a windstorm or something like that, and it tends to start everything from scratch, right? because I mean, the forest, people see old growth and they go, this is what the forest is supposed to look like. This is beautiful. Look at the lichen hanging from the tree and the owls and the whatever, right? And it's gorgeous. It's absolutely incredible to see the vertical structure and all of that. But the important thing to realize is that that's not supposed to be everything. That's a small percentage of what the forest is supposed to look like, right? Because like you were saying before, we even mentioned that fire was much more prevalent in the landscape, right? It was burning all the time. And now we've got a much more even age distribution of trees because we've been suppressing, right? And it's hard for people to understand that the forest is cyclic, right? Like it starts off young and it gets old and it dies. And it starts off young and it gets old and it dies. Whether it dies from a burn or just slowly falls over, because that happens too. But the forest requires all age classes. I don't know, the distribution of how many age classes is arguable, but they're supposed to be young, they're supposed to be in the middle, and they're supposed to be really, really old, right? It's all supposed to be that way. And what we've come to realize, there's so much research being done on forest harvest and stuff like that. And although to the naked eye, when you first walk through it, it looks destructive, it looks like it's causing a lot of problems. If you were to come back in 5 years or 10 years time, if that's like an aspen stand, you're not going to be able to see through it. You probably wouldn't even recognize it as a cup-block unless you notice the stumps, right? But it is a concern of mine because that's a common misconception that it's forest destruction and that it's causing erosion and that it's causing problems, right? And that's what most people would come to. If you're thinking about it at all, that's what you're going to think. That's what it's causing. But the soil under, for example, for a cup block, one thing was erosion. People think about erosion going into the creek and causing problems for fish habitat and stuff, right? From opening up and getting rid of the trees, and now there's soil erosion. The problem there is that the only disturbance of the soil is supposed to be on the road, right? Besides that, they do most of it in the wintertime so that there's actually minimal impact on the soil and that it's still intact. And the soil will still actually collect most of that water to run off and stuff like that. But yeah, but I feel you though. I feel you. Like there's so many, that's the main message that is hard for people to understand because it's right now, it's in my face. I can see that machines have been here. I can see that man's had their impact and that they've removed whatever habitat was there. Right. And now it's this clean slate and it looks crappy. Right. But the truth of the matter is that as far as forest harvest is concerned, that's if it's done right, right? If someone does it wrong, if someone blows through a creek that's supposed to have a bridge on it or something, then yeah, that's a problem. That's going to cause some real issues. But if it's done right, it's the most scientifically valid way we know to harvest, right? And more so than even selective logging. Although selective logging looks better to the naked eye, right? But anyways, that was just something that I kind of assumed that, and we don't have to agree on this. It's okay, but it's one of those things that that's where the science points to, right? And there's thousands and thousands of people that have been working on this problem that have the same nature values that you have, right? And they want nature to exist and they want it to perpetuate, but they also want people to perpetuate and people to exist and all this. So it's that balance, right? All I'm trying to say is that the forest management, you'd be surprised to hear probably that in Canada and the States, we do world-renowned forest management. And the cut blocks, like Clearcuts in the way that you're mentioning them, is, it's some of the newest science that they're holding up to a new standard, right? And there is supposed to be residual, like there's supposed to be corridors through some of these Clearcuts for animals to go through along rivers and stuff like that. And there's supposed to be lots of regulations around it. All I'm telling you is that it's heavily regulated, and the science is promotive of it, and but it's an uphill battle to try and get that across to people, right? Because it does look destructive, even though it isn't. But it's a crazy one. But I wanted to get your perspective on that, just because it is a common one, right?
There's another issue. I think I wasn't personally too close to this one, but there's competition there between logging and recreational values.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
that's an issue for sure.
The question is which is the most contributes the most overall, and there's so many different ways of measuring that.
Absolutely.
That no one's ever going to agree.
Agreed. Yeah.
But there was an area down where one of your clients, Spray Lake Sawmills.
I'm doing their inventory right now.
An area that some people who know the area say, well, there's a lot of trails through there that people hike on that they're not official trails, but they do exist. And this area it has high recreational value that will be lost if that logging goes on. And so, there's that point of view. It's not a question of how to log, but it's a question of whether to log or not.
Those perspectives should be absolutely, that's supposed to be part of the process, right? The public consultation, because the whole idea is that forest managers are managing the forest for maximum human value, and human value includes environmental integrity, right? And recreational use. That's supposed to be a part of it. It doesn't always work perfectly, but I can tell you it's getting better anyways. And yeah, it's a good point. It's a really good point that those values have to be taken into consideration as a long-term effect on the integrity of the forest, but not just the integrity of the forest, but also the just appreciation values, right? Multiple use values for that area. Spray Lakes is an interesting one because it is so mountainous, right? You're in the lower upper foothills kind of thing, and you can see a lot, right? Whereas if you're up north, it's just flat. You can't really see anything unless you're standing in it, right? Where in Spray Lakes, you can really, really see all the cup blocks. So one of the things that I say regarding that is that we were talking about fires again, right? And for example, we know like in BC, fires have kind of run rampant because of this mature age class that has been sustained for so long because of fire suppression, right? We have the same thing going on in Alberta. And with the pine beetle and all that only amplifies the problem, right? But so we have this, if you were to have this mat of untouched pine forest, say in Spray Lakes, right? It's only a matter of time. It's a guarantee, only a matter of time before the fire is going to come through there, right? Would you rather it take out all of the hiking area, or more likely you'd like a break of some kind of fuel break, right? And the best way to have that fuel break would be ultimately, if say people didn't exist on the planet, then there'd be a bunch of different fires that had gone through there one at a time, and they wouldn't burn the whole thing out, right? So that would be the ultimate. That's not the situation. So we utilize cut blocks to create those fire breaks. That's part of the planning process as well. So that if a fire does come through, there's a high probability that if not stopping it, the cut block might slow it down, right? Which allows more time to protect those values. So I just ask that when you're thinking about those kind of things, think about remember the fire one. The fire one's the biggest one. If you can remember what does this mean for fire, then you'll see kind of the perspective that forest managers are coming from. Because they also want to protect those values, because they're the same people that are out there that are camping and hiking with you, right? Their families go out there and they fish and they hike and they hunt and they camp and they do all that. They're out there all the time. But people see them as another entity, but they have the same values, right? That's exactly why I wanted to talk about it, because it's a really complicated issue, and I mean, we could talk about it for days, I'm sure. But yeah, so we're coming up on an hour and 15. Do you have kind of any final thoughts regarding anything that we've talked about today? Anything you wanted to mention, or maybe promote for the AHA, anything like that?
As I represent the Alberta Hiking Association on the board of Alberta TrailNet, which is the organization, it's a kind of an arm's length organization of the government. Yeah. It's gets most of its funding from the provincial government. And it works with trail building organizations. Right. There's been some controversy, and rightfully so, about the Trans-Canada Trail. There's a gentleman that has spoken to our group a few times whose wife was unfortunately killed while on a road portion of the trail. This was in Prince Edward Island, nowhere near here, but he's from Alberta. And he basically keeps telling people that the Trans-Canada Trail is basically not really what it seems to be, because so many parts of it are on roads. Now, and people point at Alberta and say, look, Alberta's got the lowest percentage of actual trail built for the Trans-Canada Trail. But what they don't realize is that we have I think the greatest total trail length on the Trans-Canada Trail for any one province is in Alberta. Huh. And the way that the Trans-Canada Trail gets built is that a route is laid out, basically consultation between the national body and the Alberta TrailNet. But you have to find local organizations that will build and maintain that section of trail. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the trail in Alberta goes through very sparsely populated areas. Mm-hmm. The only people who are going to be building trails there are people who are using motorized transportation. Mm-hmm. A policy change a few years ago for Trans-Canada Trail was that the Trans-Canada Trail, any new portions of it, could not be motorized.
Oh, okay.
So if you're building a trail up through the Peace River area, and there is a trail that goes, that part of the Trans-Canada Trail that goes that way.
Yeah.
Who's going to be building and maintaining that trail? If it's not the ATV people, who can't do it because it's not going to be trail they're allowed to use.
Right.
So naturally, if you're going to connect it, you're going to have a lot of people going partly along the roads, because at least there's somebody maintaining those roads.
Yeah, you can walk it. Yeah, no kidding.
So there's more than one side to that particular issue.
Absolutely,
and
as there is with most issues,
it would be wonderful if we could build a pedestrian or cycle equestrian trail across the country through all of Alberta, and have it maintained. But if it's in areas where you're only going to get 10 or 15 people using it a year, that just isn't the way things are going to happen.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But yeah, that would be cool to have. Absolutely. Because I know there's portions of the Trans-Canada Trail all over the place, and the ones that I've come across, they tend to be overgrown. If you know what I mean? If the only way it's open is if ATV traffic is on there, and they can carry chainsaws and they can cut and they can do whatever. But yeah, that would be a really cool opportunity to be able to see somebody, maintain that in that sense.
But once again, the Alberta TrailNet had to take it upon itself, rather than working with any local organizations, to build what is now called the High Rockies Trail.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. I might be, but I'm not.
It basically goes from the head of Goat Creek to Elk Pass.
Okay.
And that has been built, and it was...
Can you explain to people where that is, Goat Creek to Elk Pass?
Well, if you go to the town of Canmore and go up the side of the backside of Mount Rundle there, that nice road you can see slashed up the side there, and you get to the top, I think might be called White Man's Gap up at the top there. Okay. Anyway, just past there is Goat Creek's headwaters, which runs down all the way to Banff. Anyway, the Trans-Canada Trail comes up from Banff up Goat Creek, and then there was a gap to where it passes into British Columbia at Elk Pass, which is at the kind of the south end of Peter Lougheed Provincial Park.
Oh, okay.
And so there's about, I think it's 83 kilometers of trail.
That's a big chunk, yeah.
Has been built through there and is brand new, and apparently it's especially good for mountain biking.
Oh, yeah.
At that distance, nobody wants to walk 83 kilometers a day.
What did you say the trail was called again?
The High Rockies Trail.
High Rockies Trail. That's cool.
So let me put in a good word for the High Rockies Trail. But anyway, we on the TrailNet board feel very kind of paternal towards this trail.
Yeah.
Because it's ours, all ours. We're not working with anybody else.
That's awesome.
And we spent a lot of time getting it financed and organized and contracted out to have it built and so on.
Well, that's huge. That's an amazing trail. I'm sure it's like it's probably pretty unique as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not to be confused with the other trails in the area, such as the Great Divide Trail.
Oh, okay.
Although I think there may be sections of overlap.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I think it's important it's good to see that you guys are getting some headway with building some of these trails and these connections and getting a voice for the hikers in the province, right? Because you want to see that maintained, and you want people to be able to just explore, adventure, check those places out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, in kind of a summary, the big overarching issues for hiking, I think, in the province are trail construction and maintenance, especially maintenance, and the enforcement.
Right. That's always a big one too. Yeah.
There was very little manpower or funding for enforcement of protection of areas, and so there are a lot of areas that were trashed by people who just didn't know any better.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah.
So I think the current government has stepped up in both those areas, but the federal government has not yet stepped up on the maintenance in the national parks.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But you guys are doing a little bit of that, or no?
Well, we're supporting it
unofficially,
we're doing what we can. The Alberta Hiking Association, it's got a good name.
Yeah.
You think Alberta Hiking Association, Alberta Motor Association, Alberta Bicycling Association. These all sound like big organizations.
Yeah, it helps.
Well, it's a shoestring organization. No full-time staff. Although we're looking into getting grants to establish at least part-time, one person.
No, I think it's awesome. I hope you guys succeed in getting more and more funding, and I hope you can succeed in building more trail and just promoting the activity, because I think it's absolutely one that's worthwhile for sure. If people want to connect with the AHA, how would they do that?
They could start by either going to the Alberta Hiking Association page and or group. We have one of each on Facebook.
Okay.
Or they could go to the Alberta Hiking Association website, http://www.abhiking.ca.
Okay.
And that could connect you. We also have a Twitter feed.
Okay.
The most active is the Facebook group and page.
That seems to be the case for most things, I think. Mine as well.
Yeah, we've got more than 3,000 people signed up on the Facebook group.
That's awesome.
So,
well, I appreciate you coming on. This is a really good conversation. I think this is exactly what I was hoping to get, and I'm appreciative that I got to talk to someone like yourself who has a really well-rounded perspective of these issues. And you've, it's refreshing to see because you never know who's going to come on, right? So no, I really appreciate your time, and maybe again in the future sometime we can do this again.
Maybe.
I'm here. So thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot for listening, guys. If anyone has any questions for myself, for David, shoot me an email, yourforestpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate and review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks.